Life has a funny way of turning your world upside down when you least expect it there. I was elbow deep in the engine of a stubborn Volkswagen when my phone buzzed with another alert from the vet. My golden retriever Max needed surgery, and the bill was climbing higher than my shop's monthly revenue, $5. Zero, the numbers danced mockingly before my eyes as I wiped the grease from my hands. La, you've got to see this. My assistant Rachel burst into the workshop waving her phone like a victory flag. That mechanic in Seattle, she made 20 grand last month. Just by live streaming her repairs and being cute, I snorted, adjusting my bandana over my brunette curls. That's ridiculous. I fix cars, not fish for compliments online, but desperate times call for desperate measures. That evening after closing shop, I propped up my phone against a toolbox and hit go live for the first time. Hey there, I'm La Wood, and welcome to Wrenches and Wishes today. We're changing brake pads and raising money for my dog. Surgery. My voice cracked slightly at the end. The first stream was awkward. I stumbled over words, dropped a wrench on my foot, and cursed more than I should have. But something clicked when I started explaining the repair process in my own way, throwing in jokes about dating disasters in life. As a female mechanic in San Jose, the Thanksgiving parade wasn't part of my plan. I'd rather spend my holiday knuckle deep in engine oil than watch inflatable turkeys float down Market Street, but Max had other ideas the moment I loosened my grip on his leash. He bolted into the crowd, straight toward the parade route. Max, get back here. I sprinted after him, my boots pounding against the pavement. The crowd was a blur of autumn colors and surprised faces. That's when I saw her, tall blonde and elegant in a cream cashmere coat. Time seemed to slow down as Max circled her legs. Tangling us both in his leash, we crashed together like a badly choreographed rom-com scene. I caught a whiff of expensive perfume as my hands instinctively grabbed her shoulders to steady us. Both her blue eyes met mine, wide with surprise, but twinkling with amusement. Is this how you usually meet women? She asked, straightening her coat with perfectly manicured hands, only the special ones. I replied before I could stop myself. A blush crept up my neck as I realized what I'd said. I mean, I'm so sorry, my dog, sigh. She introduced herself, extending her hand with a grace that made me acutely aware of the motor oil under my fingernails. And your dog just made this parade far more interesting. As if on cue, my phone chimed with a live stream notification. The irony wasn't lost on me here. I was the reluctant internet mechanic, making a fool of myself in front of the most sophisticated woman I'd ever literally run into, but something in Sydney's smile made me forget about the growing medical bills, the struggling shop, and the absurdity of my new online venture. Little did I know that this collision would set in motion a series of events that would change everything. Max sat between us, tail wagging, looking entirely too pleased with himself. The parade marched on around us, but in that moment it felt like we were in our own little bubble of chaos and possibility. You've got a little. Sydney reached out and brushed something from my cheek. Her touch lingered for a heartbeat. Too long motor oil, she explained, but her eyes said something else entirely. The thing about internet fame is that it sneaks up on you like a loose timing belt. Quiet at first, then suddenly all hell breaks loose. 2 weeks after the parade incident, my Wrenches and Wishes channel exploded. Turns out people love watching a greenied mechanic in abandon explain the mysteries under their hood, especially when she's doing it to save her dog. Holy. Lila Rachel burst into the shop one morning, her eyes glued to her tablet. You've got 500,000 views on last night's transmission flush tutorial. In the comments they're calling you the hot rod queen of San Jose. I nearly dropped my socket wrench there, wiping my hands on my coveralls. I peered at the screen. The comment section was a flood of heart emojis, donation alerts, and surprisingly technical questions about car maintenance. The donations for Max's surgery were piling up faster than I could track them. My phone buzzed constantly with notifications and local news stations. Started calling. It was overwhelming, but Every time I looked at Max's hopeful face, I knew it was worth the embarrassment. Then I noticed something interesting in the live chat. A user named RealTQueen42 who asked surprisingly specific questions about vintage Mercedes maintenance. She'd become a regular, always dropping generous tips and leaving thoughtful comments. Something about her writing style felt familiar, but I couldn't quite place it. It was a rainy Tuesday afternoon when I heard the distinctive purr of a Mercedes-Benz S-Class. Pulling into my shop, the engine had a slight knock that shouldn't have. Been there in a car that expensive, the driver's door opened, and my heart did a little backflip. Sydney Moore stepped out looking like she just walked off a magazine cover. Well, if it isn't my favorite parade crasher, she said with a smile that made me forget about the wrench in my hand. My car is making an unusual sound, though. I have to admit, I've been watching your channel to try and diagnose it myself the pieces. Click together real T Queen 42. I raised an eyebrow, and her slight blush confirmed it. Guilty as charged, Sydney admitted, running her hand along her cars. Hood, your videos are educational and entertaining. I tried to maintain my professional composure as I popped the hood, but having Sydney watch me work was different. From performing for a camera, her presence was magnetic, and I caught myself showing off a little, explaining things in more detail than necessary. You know, she said casually, I have quite a few clients who've been asking about you. Apparently you're becoming quite the local celebrity. I groaned. Don't remind me. Yesterday someone recognized me at the grocery store. I was covered in grease and buying dog food in bulk. Sydney laughed, the sound echoing through the workshop. It's charming, authentic. That's why people connect with you. As I worked on her car, we fell into easy conversation. She told me about her real estate empire built from scratch after a divorce. I shared stories about the shop, my dreams of expanding it into a training center for women mechanics. Time slipped away until Rachel cleared her throat loudly from the office doorway. Live stream starts in 5 minutes. You know, the one where you promise to show everyone how to change their own oil. Sydney gathered her things but paused before leaving. Mind if I stay and watch in person this time? Something in her voice made my pulse quicken. Be my guest, I said, trying to sound casual. Just don't tell everyone in the comments. If I mess up, wouldn't dream of it, she replied, settling into a chair with a view of my workspace. Though I have to say, watching you work is much better in person than through a screen. As I set up my phone for the stream, I couldn't help but wonder if she was flirting or if I was reading too much into it. Either way, having Sydney Moore as an audience of one made me more nervous than performing for thousands of anonymous viewers. First, the red light on my phone blinked on, and I forced myself to focus. Hey, everyone, welcome back to Wrenches and Wishes. Today, we're going to learn the right way to change your oil and maybe save a few relationships in the process. From the corner of my eye, I saw Sydney smile, and suddenly being an accidental internet sensation didn't seem so bad after all. They say when you're looking for love, it never comes, but when you're busy rebuilding transmissions and trying to keep your sanity as a social media a sensation, it has a way of sneaking up on you. Sydney's Mercedes became a regular visitor to my shop, even though I knew damn well it was running perfectly. After the third checkup, the steering feels a bit loose, she'd say, or there's this strange noise when I turn left. Each time I'd find nothing wrong, but I played along, enjoying our dance of pretense. One particularly slow Thursday afternoon, Sydney arrived unannounced, carrying 2 cups of artisanal coffee. I was in the neighborhood, she said, though her office was across town. Thought you might need a caffeine boost. I accepted the coffee, trying not to notice how her fingers brushed mine. You know, your car's probably the most thoroughly maintained Mercedes in San Jose by now. Is that your way of telling me to stop making up excuses to visit? She leaned against my workbench, her blonde hair catching the afternoon light. The casual elegance of her pose made my throat dry. I didn't say that, I replied, focusing intently on my coffee cup, though. I am curious why a successful realtor spends so much time in a greasy garage. Sydney took a thoughtful sip. Maybe I enjoy the company, or maybe I'm fascinated by watching someone who's truly passionate about their work. The air between us felt charged, like the moment before a storm. I dated women before, but none of them had made me feel this combination of nervous and excited. Sydney was different, sophisticated, successful, and completely out of my league. How's Max doing, she asked, changing the subject. My dog had become a frequent topic of conversation, especially since his successful surgery. Better than ever, the vet bills are almost paid off. Thanks to my unexpected internet career, I gestured to my phone, which was set up for another live stream later, though. I still can't believe people want to watch me fix cars. It's not just about the cars. Sydney said softly, it's about you, the way you explain things, your humor, your authenticity. It's compelling, the word hung between us, heavy with meaning. I became acutely aware of how close we were standing, the scent of her perfume mixing with the workshop's familiar smell of oil and metal late. That evening, after most of the other shops had closed, Sydney returned. She texted asking if I could check her brake lights, but when she arrived, we both knew it was just another excuse. The workshop was quiet except for the hum of the fluorescent lights and the distant sound of traffic. I showed her the basics of brake maintenance, trying to ignore how her presence behind me made my skin tingle. You're a natural teacher, she commented, watching my hands work. Ever thought about expanding, teaching other women? Actually, yes. I straightened up, surprised by her insight. I've been dreaming of turning this place into something bigger, a garage and a school combined. Sydney's eyes lit up. I might know some investors who'd be interested in that kind of venture. Women supporting women is a powerful narrative, especially with your growing platform. We ended up sitting on my office couch, sharing takeout and discussing possibilities. Hours slipped by as we talked about dreams, fears, and the paths that had led us here. Sydney told me about her marriage, how she discovered her true self after her divorce, and the challenges of coming out later in life. It's not easy, she admitted, building a new identity. When everyone thinks they already know who you are, I understood that feeling all too well. Tell me about it. Last week, a woman asked me to sign her radiator cap, a radiator cap. Sydney laughed, but her eyes held something more serious. Law. I haven't been entirely honest about my car troubles, you don't say. I teased, my heart racing as she moved slightly closer. I think I might be addicted to watching you work. She confessed, the way you move, the confidence in your hands, the passion in your voice when you explain things. The air between us crackled with possibility. We were both aware of the line we were about to cross, the comfortable friendship we might complicate, but sometimes the best repairs require taking things apart first. Sydney, I started, but she placed a finger gently on my lips. Don't analyze this like one of your engines. She whispered, some things don't need fixing, they just need to happen. The moment hung there, delicate as a soap bubble, waiting for one of us to be brave enough to make the first move. The workshop had never felt more like home and never more electric. With potential, fame is like a runaway engine. Once it starts, there's no controlling where it takes you. My live stream channel had evolved from desperate fundraising to something bigger than I'd ever imagined. Sydney's idea about the charity event for local animal shelters seemed perfect, a way to give back and maybe wash away some of my guilt about my accidental success. We'll call it pause and pistons, Sydney announced, pacing my office with the energy of a CEO in a board meeting. Live repairs, adoption showcases, and all donations go to the shelters. I watched her move, admiring how she could make even my cluttered workspace feel like a corporate headquarters. You're really good at this whole organizing thing, aren't you? Real estate isn't just about selling houses, darling. It's about selling dreams. She paused, catching herself at the term of endearment, a slight blush coloring her cheeks. The event planning brought us closer together, giving us endless excuses for late-night strategy sessions and coffee runs. During one particularly intense planning meeting, Sydney leaned over my shoulder to look at the laptop screen, her hand resting casually on my back. The touch sent electricity through my body, making it hard to focus On the spreadsheet in front of us, everything was going smoothly until Brad Johnson, owner of the competing garage across town, started spreading rumors. "Hey, Wood," he called out one morning as I was opening up, "saw your little internet show, real professional." Turning wrenches into a peep show, I felt my face burn, but before I could respond, Sydney's Mercedes pulled up. She stepped out every inch the power broker in her tailored suit. "Mr. Johnson," she said, her voice arctic, "I believe I have some interesting information about your business practices that the city council would love to hear." Brad's face went pale. He mumbled something and hurried away, leaving me staring at Sydney in amazement. That was impressive. "Nobody messes with my," she paused, searching for the right word, "favorite mechanic." The day of the charity live stream arrived, bringing controlled chaos to the shop. We had rescue dogs and temporary pens, local news crews setting up cameras, and a line of cars waiting for repairs. I was underneath a Subaru explaining the intricacies of exhaust systems to my viewers when Sydney appeared in my line of sight. "Need a hand?" she asked, holding out a wrench. Our fingers brushed as I took it, and for a moment I forgot about the thousands of people watching. "You'll get your suit dirty," I warned, but she was already kneeling beside me. "Some things are worth getting dirty for," she replied, her voice low enough that the microphone wouldn't catch it. The event was a huge success. We raised triple R goal for the shelters, and 5 dogs found new homes as the crowd thinned and the cameras packed up Sydney, and I found ourselves alone in the shop, surrounded by the aftermath of our triumph. "We make a good team," she said, helping me clean up. She reached past me to grab a rag, her body pressing briefly against mine. The contact was innocent enough, but it left me breathless. "Yeah, we do," I managed, turning to face her. We were standing close. Too close for just friends, not close enough for what? I wanted. The air felt heavy with possibility. A crash from outside broke the moment. One of the shelter volunteers had dropped a crate, sending it clattering across the parking lot. We jumped apart like guilty teenagers, though we hadn't done anything. Yet later that night, checking the event statistics, I found a comment that made my heart stop. Anyone else notice the sexual tension between the mechanic and the blonde in the power suit? Get a room, ladies. I quickly deleted it, but not before Sydney, still monitoring the feed from home, sent me a text. "They're not wrong, you know." My fingers hovered over the phone, heart pounding. Everything was changing, and I wasn't sure if I was ready. The shop had always been my safe space, my sanctuary. Now it felt charged with new energy whenever Sydney was around, which was increasingly often. Another text came through. "We need to talk about this, about us." I stared at the message, thinking about how my life had transformed in the past few months, from struggling mechanic to internet personality, from lonely dog mom to whatever this thing with Sydney was becoming. The scary part wasn't that everything was changing, it was that I wanted it to tomorrow. I texted back, "Come by." After closing time, her response was immediate. "It's a date." The word date glowed on my screen, making my stomach flip. I looked around my empty shop, wondering how many more nights it would be, just me and my tools, before everything changed completely. Life has a way of testing you just when things start looking up. The morning after the charity event, Max collapsed during our usual walk. One moment he was chasing squirrels, the next he was lying on the grass, breathing heavily. The emergency vets words hit me like a sledgehammer. He needed another surgery, this time more complicated and expensive than the last. I sat in my office staring at the estimates when Sydney walked in without knocking. One look at my face told her everything. "What's wrong?" She was beside me in an instant, her hand on my shoulder. "Max," my voice cracked. "The vet says it's his heart, $8. Zero." "Sydney, even with the channel's income, I can't. Let me help," she said immediately. "I have the means, Lela, please." I stood up abruptly, putting distance between us. "I can't take your money. That's not, we're not what." Her blue eyes held mine. Challenging, not close enough, not important enough to each other. The tension that had been building between us crackled in the air. I turned away, focusing on the certificates on my wall. I've always handled things on my own. It's safer that way, safer. for whom Sydney's voice was quiet but intense, because from where I'm standing, all I see is you building walls to keep people out. Even me, the truth of her words stung. I'd spent years proving I could make it in a male-dominated industry shine. Everyone, I didn't need help, but now with Max's life on the line and Sydney standing there, offering support, my pride felt. Hollow rain started pattering against the workshop windows, matching my mood. Sydney moved closer, her perfume mingling with the shop's familiar scents. Accepting help doesn't make you weak, Law. It makes you human. I turned to face her, ready to argue, but the concern in her eyes undid. Me, I'm scared, I admitted, not just about Max, about this. Us, everything's changing so fast. Change can be good, she whispered, reaching up to brush a tear I hadn't realized had fallen. Her touch was gentle, grounding. The distance between us disappeared in the dim light of my office, with rain drumming on the roof and worry crushing my chest. Sydney's lips found mine. The kiss was soft, at first tentative, then deepened with months of pent-up longing. Her hands tangled in my hair as mine found her waist, pulling her closer. When we finally broke apart, both breathless, the world felt simultaneously more complicated and clearer than ever. Before Sydney rested her forehead against mine, her thumb tracing my cheekbone. Let me help, she repeated softly, not because you need it, but because I want to, because as she paused, vulnerability flickering across her features, because I care about you, both of you. The rain intensified outside, creating a cocoon around our moment. I thought about all the times I'd fixed broken things in the shop, how sometimes the most complex repairs required accepting that you couldn't do everything alone. Okay, I whispered the word, feeling like both surrender and victory, but I'm paying you back every cent. Sydney's laugh was warm against my neck. We can negotiate the terms later. She pulled back slightly, her expression turning serious right now. Letting get Max the help he needs. As we drove to the vet together, her hand found mine across the console. The touch was both comforting and terrifying, a reminder that I was no longer walking this path alone. The independent mechanic and me wanted to pull away, to maintain the careful distance I'd always kept from others, but something stronger kept my fingers intertwined with hers. The waiting room was quiet except for the hum of fluorescent lights and the occasional ping of Sydney's phone. As she rearranged her schedule to stay with me, I watched her, this powerful woman who could command rooms full of executives, choosing to sit in a veterinary clinic, holding the hand of a gray-stained mechanic. She said softly, sometimes the strongest engines need a tune-up too. I squeezed her hand, understanding she wasn't just talking about cars. As we waited for news about Max, I realized that maybe, just maybe, it was okay to let someone else help carry the load, even if that someone was an impossibly elegant realtor who'd crashed into my life thanks to my runaway dog. And a Thanksgiving parade, the morning Channel 7 news van pulled up to my shop. I was elbow deep in a transmission rebuild, local internet sensation, more than just a mechanic. That's what they were calling the segment. The reporter, a perky redhead named Amanda, seemed determined to turn my story into some kind of modern fairy tale. So La, she began, microphone thrust toward my face, tell us about the journey from struggling mechanic to social media phenomenon. And is it true there's a special someone in your life? I nearly dropped my wrench. News traveled fast in San Jose. Apparently Sydney and I had been trying to keep things quiet, enjoying the privacy of our new relationship, but between the charity event footage and our increasingly public appearances together, people were starting to talk. I just fixed cars, I deflected, wiping my hands on my coveralls. The internet stuff just happened because my dog needed surgery, sources say you and prominent realtor Sydney. More have been seen together frequently. Amanda pressed her smile, never wavering any comment on those rumors. Before I could respond, a familiar Mercedes pulled into the lot. Sydney stepped out, immaculate in a navy business suit, and my heart did that stupid flutter thing it always did when I saw her. She assessed the situation with one glance and smoothly intercepted the reporter. I'd be happy to discuss Lila's contributions to our local business community, she said, steering Amanda away from my workspace, particularly her innovative approach to automotive education and community outreach. Later that evening, after the cameras left, Sydney found me in the office staring at my phone. The comments on my latest video were a mix of support and judgment, with some viewers more interested in my personal life than my mechanical expertise. "You okay?" She perched on my desk, her hand finding mine, just wondering when fixing cars turned into being a public figure. I sighed some of these comments. Sydney's expression darkened as she read over my shoulder. "Ignore them. They just." A sharp knock interrupted us through the office window. I saw one of Sydney's biggest clients, a conservative developer known for his traditional values. His face was thunderous as he waved a tablet displaying the evening news segment. Sydney squeezed my hand before standing. "Let me handle this." She walked out to meet him, every inch the confident businesswoman, but I could see the tension in her shoulders. I couldn't hear their full conversation, but phrases like professional image and client comfort drifted through the open door. Sydney's voice remained steady, but I caught the slight tremor in it that only someone who'd kissed her would recognize. When she turned, her composure cracked slightly. "He's pulling his listings, all of them." "Sydney, I'm so sorry." I stood reaching for her, but she shook her head. "Don't you dare apologize. His business isn't worth hiding who I am, who we are." The power went out, suddenly plunging the shop into darkness, except for the glow of emergency lights. A summer storm had been threatening all day, and it finally hit with full force in the dim blue light. Sydney looked both vulnerable and determined. "You know what? I'm tired of calculating every move, wondering what people will think. I spent years doing that in my marriage." Thunder crashed outside as she moved closer. "The power's out." "Anyway," she murmured, her fingers tracing my jawline. "Might as well make the most of it." The kiss was different from our first one, less desperate, more deliberate. My hands found her waist as hers, tangled in my hair, neither of us caring about the grease stains on her expensive suit. A flash of lightning illuminated the shop, and I caught our reflection in the window, the elegant realtor and the mechanic wrapped in each other's arms. It should have looked ridiculous, but somehow it just looked right. "Let them talk," Sydney whispered against my lips. "I'm not hiding anymore." The storm raged outside, but in that moment, with Sydney in my arms and the familiar smell of motor oil around us, I felt completely at peace. The internet could speculate, clients could complain, and reporters could spin whatever story they wanted. Some things were worth the headlines. When the power finally came back on, we were sitting on the office couch, Sydney's head on my shoulder, planning our next moves. The world might not be ready for us, but we were ready for it. "You know," Sydney said, straightening her rumpled blazer, "this isn't exactly how I planned to come out to my business associates." I couldn't help but laugh. Well, I never planned to be an internet celebrity, so I guess we're both breaking new ground. They say the past has a way of catching up with you. For Sydney, it arrived in the form of her ex-husband Richard storming into her office with a stack of printed screenshots from my live streams. I heard about it when she showed up at the shop that evening, her usual composure fractured around the edges. "He's threatening to use our relationship to challenge the divorce settlement," she said, pacing between tool cabinets. "Claims I was hiding my lifestyle choices during the proceedings." I put down my wrench, fighting the urge to hunt Rich. I'd done myself. Can he actually do that legally? No, but he can make noise, create problems with conservative clients. Sydney ran a hand through her blonde hair, messing up its perfect arrangement. "He's already contacted several of my biggest accounts." The timing couldn't have been worse. My own problems had started that morning when I opened my live stream comments to find a flood of homophobic trolls. Someone had created a compilation video of every moment Sydney and I had shared on camera, set to dramatic music and overlaid with suggestive commentary. "Have you seen this?" Rachel asked, showing me her phone. The video had thousands of views already. Some of the comments are getting pretty nasty. I scrolled through them, my stomach turning. Mixed among the supportive messages were threats, slurs, and calls to boycott both my shop and Sydney's real estate business. Some even included our personal information. I won't let them intimidate us, Sydney declared when I showed her, but I could see the worry behind her determined expression. She'd spent years building her reputation in real estate. That night, as we sat in my living room with Max curled up between U.S. Sydney's phone kept buzzing with messages from concerned clients. I watched her compose careful responses, maintaining her professional facade while her free hand gripped mine tightly. Maybe we should take a break, I suggested reluctantly, just until things calm down. Sydney's head snapped up, her blue eyes flashing. Don't you dare. I didn't survive a loveless marriage and years of hiding to back down now. The weekend brought unexpected relief in the form of a coastal getaway. Sydney had a beach house in a small town 2 hours north, far from the drama in San Jose. As we drove along the Pacific Coast Highway, windows down and radio up, I watched her gradually relax. You know what Richard would hate most about this, Sydney said suddenly. The wind whipping her hair. That I'm happier now than I ever was in 15 years with him. The beach house was a modern marvel of glass and wood perched on a cliff overlooking the ocean. That evening, as we walked Max along the empty beach, Sydney told me more about her marriage. I always knew something was missing, she admitted, watching the sunset paint the waves gold. I just didn't understand what until I met you. A notification pinged on my phone. Another hateful comment on my latest video. Sydney gently took the phone from my hands and turned it off. They can't touch us here, she said, pulling me close. The kiss tasted like salt, air, and freedom. Later, curled up on the deck with blankets and wine, Sydney showed me an email from her daughter. Claire, she wants to meet you properly, she said, her voice thick with emotion. Says she's never seen me this happy. The moon rose over the ocean as we talked about the future, about my shop's expansion plans, about Sydney's ideas for an LGBTQ-friendly real estate initiative, about all the possibilities stretching out before us like the endless horizon. Richard called again. Sydney mentioned casually refilling our glasses. I told him if he wants a legal battle, I'll give him one. I've got enough dirt on his business practices to keep his lawyers busy for years. I couldn't help but smile. Remind me never to get on your bad side too late for that, she teased. You've already stolen my heart. That's a serious offense. The weekend passed too quickly. But it gave us something valuable: perspective. The trolls, Richard. The gossip, none of it mattered compared to what we'd found together as we packed to head back to San Jose. Sydney received another call from a client threatening to leave this time. She didn't try to smooth things over. I understand your concerns, she said firmly, but I won't apologize for who I am or who I love. I wish you the best finding another agent. She hung up, looking more relieved than worried. You know what, let them talk. We've got better things to do. Driving back with Max sleeping in the back seat and Sydney's hand in mine, I realized something important. Sometimes the biggest repairs aren't about fixing what's broken. They're about building something new and stronger. In its place, sometimes support comes from the most unexpected places. The morning after we returned from the coast, I arrived at my shop to find a line of cars waiting not for repairs, but in solidarity. Local LGBTQ plus business owners had organized an impromptu rally in response to the online harassment Maria from the coffee shop down the street handed me a rainbow-decorated latte. We take care of our own, she said with a wink. Plus you fixed my Subaru last month when nobody else could. Figure it out. The parking lot turned into an impromptu community gathering. Food truck owners I'd helped with engine troubles, boutique owners whose delivery vans I'd maintained, and even competing mechanics showed up to demonstrate their support. Who knew fixing cars could build such a loyal following? I mused to Rachel, watching the crowd grow. Sydney arrived mid-morning, and the sight of her stepping out of her Mercedes made my heart skip. She'd been in meetings all morning with her real estate team, and her professional armor was firmly in place, but it softened when she saw the gathering surprise. I said, gesturing to the crowd, turns out We're not as alone as the trolls want us to believe. Before she could respond, a young woman pushed through the crowd, CLA Sydney's daughter. I recognized her from photos, but nothing had prepared me for meeting her in person. She had her mother's blonde hair and commanding presence, but her smile was entirely her own. So you're the famous mechanic, she said, giving me an appraising look. Mom won't shut up about you. Sydney's face flushed. CLA. I thought you were in Seattle until next week, and Miss Alvis. CLA gestured at the impromptu celebration. Besides, I wanted to meet the woman brave enough to date my control freak mother. Claire Sydney protested, but her eyes were shining. The moment was interrupted by a commotion at the edge of the lot. Brad Johnson, my competitor, was arguing with someone, a sketchy-looking guy trying to pour something near my shop's back entrance. Hey, I shouted, running over. The man dropped a container and fled, leaving behind the unmistakable smell of gasoline. Brad grabbed the container before it could spill further, saw him lurking around, figured he was up to no good. Thanks, I managed, surprised by help from such an unexpected source. Look, Brad said gruffly. I may not understand all this. He waved vaguely at the rainbow flag some supporters had brought, but nobody messes with San Jose's mechanics. We look out for our own. The incident could have cast a shadow over the day, but instead it brought everyone closer. Local police increased patrols around both my shop and Sydney's office. The community rallied even stronger, with business owners setting up an informal neighborhood watch. Later that evening, as we were cleaning up, Claire helped me organize my tools while Sydney made calls to her clients. You know, Claire said casually, I haven't seen her this happy since, well, ever, even when she was with Dad. There was always something missing. They paused, a wrench halfway to its drawer. I never meant to complicate her life. Sometimes complications are exactly what we need. Claire smiled. Besides, watching Dad throw a tantrum about this has been highly entertaining. Sydney joined us, slipping an arm around my waist. What are you two conspiring about? Just giving Lila the shovel talk, Claire said. Innocently, hurt my mom, and they'll never find your body, that sort of thing. The three of us laughed, the sound echoing through the workshop that had become so much more than just a place of business. It was a sanctuary, a meeting point, a symbol of resistance against small-minded hatred. As the last supporters left, leaving us with promises of continued vigilance and support, Sydney pulled me into her office. Move in with me, she said suddenly. What, move in with me? She repeated. Life's too short to waste time worrying about what others think. Besides, she added with a smile, your apartment's too small for all your tools. Looking around my shop at the signs of community support still visible everywhere. At Claire chatting with Rachel outside, at Max sleeping peacefully in his corner bed, I realized something profound. Home isn't always about a place. Sometimes it's about the people who stand beside you when the world tries to knock you down. Yes, I said, pulling her close, but we're keeping the shop exactly as it is. Grease stains and all. I wouldn't have it any other way, Sydney whispered, sealing the deal with a kiss. The San Jose Real Estate Association's annual gala was exactly as pretentious as I'd imagined. Standing in the corner of the ballroom, tugging at my borrowed cocktail dress, I felt like an imposter. Sydney naturally looked perfectly at home in her design minor gown, working the room with practiced ease. Stop fidgeting, Rachel whispered, having come as my moral support. You look amazing. I wasn't so sure the dress was beautiful. Sydney's choice, of course, but I felt naked without my coveralls and tools. This was Sydney's world, full of power suits and million-dollar deals, and I was just the mechanic who'd somehow crashed the party. The whispers followed us around the room. Most were subtle, but some were deliberately loud enough to hear. There's Sydney Moe and her mechanic, one woman stage, whispered to her colleague. Can you imagine all those years? Married to Richard, and now the Sydney must have heard, because she suddenly appeared at my side, her hand finding mine. Dance with me, she said, not asking here. Now I glanced around the crowded ballroom. Everyone's watching. Let them watch, she led me to the dance floor. Just as the band started playing something slow, Other couples gave us a wide berth, but Sydney didn't seem to notice or care. She pulled me close, one hand on my waist, the other holding mine. "You know what I love about you?" she murmured as we swayed to the music. "You're real. Everyone here is playing a part wearing masks, but you're exactly who you are all the time before." I could respond. Richard appeared beside us, his new trophy wife hovering anxiously nearby. "Quite a show you're putting on, Sydney," he sneered. "The board members are watching." Sydney grip on my hand tightened. "Good, then make him watch this too." She turned to face the room, her voice carrying clearly over the music. "I'd like everyone's attention, please." The ballroom fell silent. My heart hammered against my ribs as Sydney addressed the crowd. "For years, I played by your rules. I smiled at the right people, said the right things, pretended to be someone I wasn't, and I was miserable." She looked at me, her blue eyes fierce. "Then I met someone who taught me that authenticity isn't just about being honest with others, it's about being honest with yourself." Richard tried to interrupt, but Sydney wasn't finished. "Some of you have threatened to take your business elsewhere. That's your choice, but I won't hide anymore. I won't apologize for finding happiness, even if it doesn't fit your narrow view of what's acceptable." The silence that followed was deafening. Then from the back of the room, someone started clapping. It was Claire who'd arrived. Without anyone noticing, others joined in first, a few then more, until the applause filled the ballroom. Richard stormed out, his face purple with rage. His wife hesitated, then gave us a small secret smile, before following him later that night as we drove home in Sydney's Mercedes. She couldn't stop grinning. Did you see their faces, especially when Mrs. Henderson, the biggest conservative on the board, came over to congratulate? "Use, I think you just rewrote the rules of San Jose real estate," I said, still amazed by her courage. Rules are meant to be broken," she replied, squeezing my hand. "Speaking of which, I have a proposition for you." She pulled into my shop's parking lot, which was strange since we were supposed to be heading home. Inside, she led me to my office and pulled out a stack of papers. "What's this, plans?" she said, spreading them out on my desk. "For the expansion, I've been working with some investors, progressive ones who love the idea of a woman-owned automotive education center." I stared at the blueprints, my vision blurring slightly. The plans showed my shop transformed into something bigger, better, but still maintaining its heart and soul. "You did all this," Sydney rapped, her arms around me from behind. "You're not the only one who knows how to fix things. Sometimes it just takes a different kind of tools." The plans included classrooms, additional repair bays, and even a small Cafe Maria suggestion, apparently. But what caught my eye was the name Wood and More Automotive Academy Partner, Sydney asked softly. I turned in her arms, not caring that my tears might ruin my makeup and everything. I answered. The kiss we shared tasted like victory over prejudice, over fear, over all the small-minded people who tried to keep us in our designated boxes outside. The San Jose night sparkled with possibility, and for the first time, I felt completely, utterly free. By the way, Sydney murmured against my lips, "You look incredible in that dress, but I think I prefer you in coveralls." "Good, because this dress is killing me." We stayed in the shop late into the night, planning our future between kisses, while Max snoozed contentedly under my desk. Sometimes the best revolutions start with a simple repair job and end with something beautifully, perfectly whole. 6 months can change everything. My little shop had transformed into something I'd never imagined possible. The Wood and More Automotive Academy was thriving, with a waiting list of women eager to learn the trade. The walls, once covered in old car posters, now displayed certificates and photos of our graduating classes. "Check this out." Rachel called from the front desk, holding up her tablet. My latest live stream had hit 2 million views, a tutorial on changing brake pads that somehow turned into an impromptu discussion about breaking gender barriers in male-dominated industries. Who knew auto repair could be so revolutionary? I mused, watching a group of students practice on an engine block. Among them was Richard's soon-to-be ex-trophy wife, Janet, who'd shown up one day asking for classes. Turns out she had a natural talent for Diagnostics Sydney had transformed too, but in subtler ways her real. A state practice now specialized in helping LGBTQ plus couples find homes, and she'd become something of an icon in the business. Community, the woman who once carefully managed every aspect of her public image, now proudly displayed our photo on her office desk. Miss Wood, one of our younger students, approached holding a wrench uncertainly. "Could you show me that transmission thing again?" I smiled, remembering my own early days, learning the trade first rule. It's just Lila and bring that transmission. Over here, everyone should see this as I demonstrated the technique. I caught Sydney watching from her makeshift office in the corner. She'd insisted on keeping a desk here, claiming she worked better surrounded by the sounds of the shop. I knew the real reason. She just liked watching me teach. "Ladies," I addressed the class. "Remember what we talked about? Every engine tells a story. Your job isn't just to fix it, it's to listen to what it's trying to tell you, just like relationships," Sydney chimed. And making the students laugh, the shop had become more than a business. It was a community. Maria's Cafe Corner was always busy serving coffee to students and clients alike. Local LGBTQ plus youth started hanging out after school, finding acceptance, and maybe learning a useful skill or two that afternoon. While I was deep in an engine rebuild demonstration, Sydney slipped out for a meeting. I thought nothing of it until she returned with Max wearing a bow tie. "What's the occasion?" I asked, wiping grease from my hands. "You'll see," she said mysteriously, sharing a knowing look with Rachel later as I was closing up. I found a note taped to my toolbox. "Meet me on the roof." Sydney had recently convinced me to add a rooftop garden space for students to relax between classes. The sunset painted the San Jose skyline in shades of pink and gold. As I climbed the stairs, what I found took my breath away. Sydney had transformed the space with tiny lights and flowers. Max sat proudly beside her, his bow tie slightly askew. "What's all this? Just celebrating," she said, pulling me close. "The Academy's success, our life together, everything we'd moved in together months ago, but somehow this moment felt more intimate." Tea. Sound of laughter drifted up from below. The evening class was ending, and our students were heading home. Some would return to supportive families, others to challenging situations, but here they'd found a place where they could be themselves. "We did good, didn't we?" I asked, leaning into Sydney's embrace. "We did amazing," she corrected, "and we're just getting started." Max barked in agreement, his tail wagging as he watched a flock of birds pass overhead. The city stretched out before us, full of possibilities we hadn't even imagined yet. "By the way," Sydney added casually, "Stella's coming for dinner tomorrow." Sheck bringing her new girlfriend. Apparently, she was inspired by her story to come out to her college friends. My heart swelled with pride and love for our unconventional family. The shop hummed below us, a constant reminder of where our journey began, but up here holding Sydney while Max leaned against our legs. I knew this wasn't just about fixing cars anymore. It was about building something new, something stronger. One repair, one lesson, one love story at a time. Life has a funny way of bringing things full circle 1 year after Max's escape at the Thanksgiving parade. Sydney and I found ourselves back on Market Street, but this time as Grand Marshals. The parade committee had specifically requested our participation, calling us inspirational figures in the community. Me inspirational. I still had grease under my fingernails. "Stop fidgeting," Sydney whispered, adjusting my collar. We were perched on the back of a vintage convertible one. I'd restored myself, waiting for the parade to start. Max sat between us, wearing a tiny Marshall's hat that Claire had insisted on. "I can't believe we're doing this," I muttered, watching the crowds gather. "I fix cars. I'm not supposed to be in parades. You do so much more than fix cars," Sydney replied, squeezing my hand. "You change lives. Just ask your students," as if on cue. A cheer erupted from the sidewalk. A group of our academy graduates had shown up wearing matching coveralls with rainbow patches. Janet was among them, waving a sign that read, "My ex called me." High maintenance now. I do my own maintenance. The parade route was the same as last year, but everything else had changed. The wood and more automotive academy float followed behind us, showcasing our students at work. Maria's coffee cart handed out free drinks to the crowd. Even Brad Johnson had shown up with his family, giving us a gruff nod of respect halfway through. The root Sydney suddenly stood up in the car, making my heart jump. "What are you doing? Something spontaneous," she replied with that smile that still made my knees weak. She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a small box. The crowd fell silent. As Sydney turned to face me, her blue eyes sparkling Leah Wood, "You crashed into my life exactly 1 year ago, right here on this street. You taught me that love isn't about perfection, it's about being perfectly yourself." My heart stopped as she opened the box, revealing a ring with a tiny wrench engraved on the band. "Will you marry me?" The crowd held its breath. Max wagged his tail expectantly, and I started laughing, reaching into my own pocket. I pulled out an identical box. I was going to ask you at the end of the parade, I admitted, opening my box to reveal a ring with a tiny house engraved on it. Sydney's eyes widened, then she burst out laughing too. The crowd caught on and erupted in cheers as we exchanged rings right there in the living car, Max barking his approval. "Yes," we said simultaneously. And the kiss we shared was broadcast on every local news channel. Later that evening, surrounded by friends and family at the shop, Sydney and I watched our proposal go viral on social media. CLA was already planning the wedding, insisting that the ceremony had to be at the academy. Rachel and Marie were arguing good-naturedly about catering rights. "You know what this means?" Sydney murmured, her head on my shoulder. "You're stuck with me forever now, promise." I pulled her closer, breathing in the mix of her perfume and the shop's familiar scents. Max dozed at our feet, still wearing his marshal's hat. Through the windows, we could see the academy's lights, glowing a beacon for anyone who needed a safe place to learn to grow to love. "Remember when you said some things don't need fixing?" Sydney asked, playing with her new ring. "They just need to happen." You were right. Sometimes the best repairs aren't repairs at all, they're transformations. The shop that had once been my sanctuary had become so much more: a school, a community center, a home, and now it would be where we started our next chapter together. So Sydney said with a mischievous glint in her eye, "Should we have the wedding in coveralls or evening gowns?" "Both," I decided. "Just like us, a little bit of grease, a little bit of glamour." As our friends and family celebrated around us, I looked at Sydney and saw our whole future reflected in her eyes. Some people spend their lives fixing broken things, but sometimes if you're really lucky, you find something that was never broken at all, just waiting for the right moment to become exactly what it was meant to be. Max barked in agreement, and the whole room raised their glasses to the mechanic and the realtor who found love in a Thanksgiving parade. Sometimes the best stories don't end with happily ever after, they end with happily right now and tomorrow and every day after that.